Tonight on the Midnight Drive, we're in Utah, and we're heading out past the edge of everything. There's a stretch of land in the Uintah Basin that doesn't look like much at first glance. Flat, open, quiet. But it's become one of the most talked about places in the country for things people can't quite explain. Lights in the sky, strange animal behavior, stories that don't quite line up. But what stands out the most isn't what people say that they've seen. It's what they felt while they were there. Tonight, we're visiting Skinwalker Ranch. And sometimes, it's not what's happening around you. It's what your mind starts to do when nothing clearly is. Skinwalker Ranch sits in a part of Utah that doesn't draw attention on its own. The Uintah Basin is wide. It's open. It's dry in a way that feels consistent. There aren't any landmarks that stand out once you're there. No dense tree cover, no city noise, just stretches of land that feel like they go on longer than you'd expect. The ranch itself covers a few hundred acres. Fenced, private, watched more closely now than it used to be. If you drive out toward it, you don't accidentally end up there. You know exactly where you're going. Or at least, you know there's something you're supposed to be looking for. From the outside, it doesn't immediately match the way that it's talked about. There's no visible sign that anything unusual is happening. No movement that stands out. No obvious source of the stories that surround it. As a matter of fact, if you follow the road, you will just be met with a fence, an opening, and signage saying that they don't allow trespassers. Pretty anticlimactic, all things considered, with all of the hype around this place. Over time, Skinwalker Ranch has become associated with just about every kind of unexplained claim. Lights in the sky that don't move the way that planes do. Animals behaving in ways that don't make sense. Equipment malfunctioning without a clear cause. Moments that people describe as missing time. Some of the claims are more extreme. Descriptions of large figures. Things seen at a distance that don't hold their shape when they're looked at directly. Stories that get repeated enough that they start to feel like part of the place itself. But alongside all of that, there's a whole nother layer. People who have been there and experienced nothing. No lights, no movement, no clear sign of anything unusual. That contradiction shows up again and again. One person describes something they can't explain. Another walks away with nothing to report at all. And both of those accounts exist in the same space. That's a part of what makes the place difficult to clearly define. Because there's no single experience that everyone agrees on. There's just a collection of moments, some quiet, some intense. Most of them hard to verify beyond the person who experienced them. Over time, the ranch has moved from a local curiosity to something much bigger. Documentaries, television shows, ongoing research projects. The kind of attention that doesn't just report on a place, but shapes how the place itself is understood. Details get repeated. Certain stories become more prominent than others. Some aspects are emphasized. Others fade into the background. And the longer that cycle continues, the more the place becomes defined by its reputation. At that point, it's not just a location. It's an idea. A place where something is supposed to happen. Even if you don't fully believe it, even if you go there skeptical, that expectation is already there. You've heard enough to know what you're walking into when you find yourself at the gates of Skinwalker Ranch. And that changes how you experience it. Before you even get close to the property, you're thinking about it differently. You are biased. You're paying more attention. You're listening more closely. You're trying to pick up on things that might normally be out of your focus in your day-to-day life. That awareness builds gradually. By the time you're near the gate, the environment hasn't changed, but your perception of everything has. The silence feels more noticeable. The openness feels less neutral. It doesn't feel empty. It feels like something could fill all of that space at any moment. And that's where the shift begins. Because even if nothing is happening, it starts to feel like something might. And once that possibility is in place, once that anticipation is there, it doesn't take much to keep it there. A sound that doesn't resolve right away. A moment at the edge of your vision. A moment where something doesn't quite line up for you. None of those things confirm anything, but they don't dismiss it either. They just sit in that space. Unresolved. And that's enough. Because Skinwalker Ranch isn't just a place that people visit. It's a place people arrive already thinking differently. They've almost created their experience before they've had it. They're already looking for something, even if they don't know exactly what it is. And once that mindset is there, it becomes part of the experience itself, not separate from it. Which means that what you feel when you're there isn't just about the land. It's about everything you brought with you and everything you're expecting to find, whether you realize it or not. Have you ever heard of Skinwalker Ranch before? Have you ever visited Skinwalker Ranch? I would love to hear your experience there. Please let us all know in the comments below wherever you might be listening. If you'd like, send us a message on the Midnight Drive on our hotline, 402-610-2836. When people describe their time near Skinwalker Ranch, they don't always start with something they saw. Think about that. When people describe their time near Skinwalker Ranch, they don't always start with something that they saw. A lot of the time, they start with something that they felt. Not a specific event, not a clear moment when something happened, just a shift, just a feeling, just something instinctive. A sense that something wasn't quite right in the moment. One of the most common things that people say is that it feels like they're being watched. Not in a direct way, not like someone standing nearby, more distant, like something is there, but not close enough to identify. Now, that feeling doesn't come with proof. There's nothing to point to, but it's consistent enough to show up in a lot of different accounts, and it doesn't require anything dramatic. It can happen standing near the gate, sitting in a car, looking out across the land that doesn't offer much to focus on. It's in those moments your attention doesn't settle the way that it normally does. It keeps moving, scanning, trying to lock onto something that explains the feeling. Sometimes it doesn't find anything. And that's where it starts to get uncomfortable. Because like we've talked about many times before on the show, the brain isn't great. It's sitting with unresolved space. When there's nothing clearly happening, it starts to assume that something might be. That assumption isn't always conscious. It shows up as tension. It shows up as heightened awareness. It shows up as a physical response that doesn't match what's visibly in front of you. People describe feeling nauseous. Not from anything that they can see or smell, just a reaction, just a gut response, something in the body responding before the mind has anything to attach it to. Others talk about leaving quickly. Not because anything forced them to, but because staying started to feel like the wrong decision. That's the part that stands out. When the mind has already attached a morality to it, a right decision versus a wrong decision, sticking around feels like the wrong decision. And the experience doesn't always escalate. It doesn't build into something obvious. It just reaches a point where being there no longer is what feels neutral. And for most, that's enough to get out of there, to leave. There are also moments that feel more defined. Things people think they saw. Movement in the sky that doesn't follow a clear pattern. Shapes that don't resolve into anything familiar. But even those descriptions tend to stop short of certainty. It didn't look like anything I've seen before, you might hear. Or something like, it didn't move the way that it should have. These are statements that describe the experience without fully explaining it. And that lack of resolution keeps everything in place. Because once something is clearly defined, the tension drops. It becomes something known. But here, At Skinwalker Ranch, that doesn't always happen. So the experience stays open, unfinished, unresolved, which means the feeling doesn't go away as quickly. There's also another layer that gets talked about. Something people refer to is the idea that whatever happens there doesn't always stay there. Stories about strange occurrences following people home. Small things at first. Objects out of place. Unusual sounds. A continued sense that something is off long after they've returned home. Whether or not those experiences are connected to the ranch, the structure of the story remains the same. Something happened. It wasn't fully understood. And the feeling attached to it didn't resolve when the person left. That pattern shows up a lot in different contexts, not just here. But the way it's framed at Skinwalker Ranch gives it a name. It gives it a narrative. It gives something that people can point to when they're trying to explain what and how they felt. That's where everything starts to overlap. The place, the stories, the expectation. They all feed into each other. You hear about the ranch. You go there, already aware of what's been said. Your perception shifts. You feel something that doesn't quite line up. Then you try to make sense of it, not from a blank slate, but from everything that you've already heard. That doesn't mean the experience isn't real. The feeling is real. The response is real. The tension is real. But the source of it isn't always clear. And that's what makes a place like this difficult to pin down. Because it doesn't rely on something happening in a way that can be confirmed. It relies on how the experience unfolds internally. How your brain reacts to an environment that doesn't give it enough to work with. How the brain fills in space that feels too open, too quiet, too undefined. That doesn't automatically mean there's nothing there. It just means that what you feel doesn't always come from something that you can see. And once you've felt it, even briefly, it does become part of how you think about the place. Not as a collection of stories anymore, but as something that you personally experienced, even if you can't fully explain what that experience was. And that's where Skinwalker Ranch exists for most people. Not as something proven, not as something dismissed, but as something that sits in between, defined less by what's happening and more by how it feels when you're there. You want to know what? Sometimes that's enough.